first of all, thank you all for remaining in your seats. I'm going to try to stick to the schedule and get through this, and I applaud you all for your resilience. And if you're like me, you're now hungry, thanks for the props, and scared, right? I'm just scared. And then you look at the title of my presentation and you say, oh yes, this is hitting the bottom of the barrel on the fear chart, right? So here's my promise to you. We're going on a quick journey. We're going to take you from the family business sale, which was catastrophic, so by definition that means it's definitely not good news. And I'm going to take you to a position, I hope, of optimism in action and opportunity. And that's what caused the formation of Dynamic Legacy, Inc. And the good news is, you absolutely do not have to have a business catastrophe to benefit from the advice, and you will actually leave here today with steps to implement that are useful to you and are free. So on the journey, by definition, a catastrophic business event is a sequence of events that derail the plan. It challenges the plan, the people, drains the resources, and creates uncertainty. At some point during the crisis, as you've heard already today through Maria's story and other stories, a direction becomes clear, and it may not be the one in the plan at all. So the plan's contribution is diminished, eroded, or rendered inapplicable. So in our family, what it looked like is something like this. I come from a serial, multi-generational entrepreneurial family, meaning that everybody's starting companies and they go on through the generations. So in this particular story, it was the company my dad started and ran for 30 years and successfully transitioned to my brother and continued running. And at about year 45 or 46, we did, as somebody alluded to earlier today, get that phone call. And let's face it, if somebody says to you, "Are you sitting on the phone?" you immediately stand up and the adrenaline's running. In my situation, I put the baby down. And so I got the phone call in February of 2010. It was from my sister in Vancouver. I don't know why she gets the news first, because we're based here. And she said, our brother is in the hospital. They don't know what it is. It's not good. And they're doing brain surgery tomorrow. So it's not much to do in that situation except farm out your children and get to the hospital and step into that role. Because of my legal background, business experience, and wealth, at the time I was a wealth manager, I had a number of skill sets that others didn't have at the table. And I was the person at the hospital that had the conversation with my brother that night when I arrived, saying, okay, forget trying to look for the power of attorneys and the living wills and so on and so forth. We're just using the hospital form and signing it here. So we went through this horrible, as you can imagine, series of hours and that turned into days where you don't sleep. And a small correction to the introduction, I was an officer and signing director of the company, but I wasn't an owner. So this is a story that speaks to family and identity and the values of our business legacy, which were created to make sure that the business was looked after, and what family does in those circumstances well beyond being an owner or shareholder. So not to get caught in those events, but the news was terminal, and the surgery happened within 30 hours, and they removed 20 to 30% of his brain on the table that day. My parents were on their way home. They got on a plane not knowing whether he would live or die. They indicated he would likely not remember people, the ability to speak, write. He may be very confused, and in fact, the morbidity rate on the table that day was going to be quite significant. But he lived. We made it through the day, and that was a Friday. So by Sunday, he was doing quite well. His competency was still questionable because the brain was still swollen. And the Sunday night at 10 o'clock, the neurosurgeon comes in, who's like next to God in my world for sure, and he held up a pen and said, "Do you know what this is?" And my brother said, "Yes, and so do you." Never lost the sense of humor. Nobody in my family does. But we knew we had to deal with the business. So we went through, and the next day we had that meeting at the company where my 84-year-old father, who started the company, joined me in front of the employees, and we had to share the news. But we didn't know what the news was because we weren't certain what his competencies were yet. We weren't certain what the challenge to the plan would yield. And let's be clear, I had a role in the succession plan. We optimized our tax structures. We had every legal product solution available. We are an example of good transition practices. But these are the things that you can't account for. So I had to step into the role inside of the company that day and carry on the operations. So here are some of the challenges we faced that day. What do we communicate to the company? How can we control what gets out to the competitors? And what do I know about industrial roofing? Nothing. I'm the only child in our family that never actually worked inside the company. So where are the others? Well, they both live on the West Coast, one in Vancouver, one in California, and they neither continued to work in the family business nor had any interest in it. So my father and I stood in front of the members of the company, and we told them only what we did know, and we left them with the same questions we had. He's sick. He had a tumor in his brain. They operated. They got 98% of the tumor. He's doing very well. We don't know what the next days bring. Well, the internet being the internet these days, we left them to either go on the internet and figure out what that means, but we didn't need to tell them. One of the things I now share with families is how to communicate bad news. People know bad news is coming, and you don't need to actually put words around the worst parts of it. These people are smart and they're invested in the organization. But one of the defining moments that I experienced that day is when I took my dad to lunch. And an employee came up, because we went to the local Wimpy's of all places, but we were up near the airport, that's what you do. And he shook my dad's hand and he said, you don't probably remember me, it's been 16 years since you were in the company, but you hired me when I finished high school. And I just want to say how sorry I am for your family that you're going through this, and please let me know what I can do. And I was immediately struck down with the obligation to the employees, because I thought, okay, these people have never worked for another organization, and we are their family. So moving forward quickly at this point, my brother returned to work 5 days later. Amazing, right? Except the diagnosis is still terminal. But during those 5 days, I had to sign invoices for containers from China. I didn't know we did business in China. We had a new accountant that was only in the seat for 9 months and didn't want the responsibility of a controller position. So we had to haul in the controller who had retired 9 months earlier after she'd worked for the company for 45 years. And it's amazing the people that come forward, because it is a family. You know this. So as part of this story, as the months continued and my brother continued with his treatments, we were very blessed. Most people don't get the time we did with him. We got 13 months, of which I'll call 10 to 11 high functioning. But 90 days later, I was diagnosed with cancer. And this is the comedy of life, right? Not comedy, but the catastrophe. And if you can imagine, my prognosis wasn't exactly stellar. So what are we left with? So now you're left with an owner who actually wasn't my brother, it was my sister-in-law, because we did everything for creditor protection and optimizing tax and legal structures. And she's looking around the room, and her world has blown up. And so, a sale became the obvious conclusion, because my brother's children were still in high school. So I actually teach this as a business case now in a variety of academic institutions, and it goes on for 2 to 3 hours to talk about all the milestones and decision-making that went along the way. But we sold the business. And what I want to talk about is the learnings from that experience and what we've learned as a family, and part of what I share with families now professionally. So you've heard about living wills, we've heard about business continuity and business succession plans. And this is what you're going to take with you today. You all have the ability to leave this room and create a business contingency plan. I've put together a one-page which is available outside. It looks like this, and it'll probably be available on my website later if there's interest in that. But effectively, you need to run through all the operational business units and divisions in your company, and I would suggest quarterly, you need to identify with complete focus what I call the penultimate fish or cut bait rules around the operations of your business. So what does that look like? I'm not going to stay on this slide because I think we've covered that, but it addresses, the business contingency plan addresses the day-to-day matters. It gives your family time to process, think, and then come up with a plan at times when the plan is diminished, eroded, or challenged. It provides a gap identification, sensitivity analysis, and risk assessment of the operations of your business so that the business can continue to function no matter what the situations you face. It does not have to be a catastrophe. Updated quarterly, I would suggest at a minimum. And what's the soft outcome of this? If you start to do this regularly, your business is going to operate more efficiently, more effectively, and be a higher profit generator. So it eliminates the uncertainty. It acts as a map. It's decision-making modeling for whoever steps into the shoes and has to make those calls at a time when other people or professionals or key personnel are not available, like I did. It also guides the applications of resources. And as I said, it's the penultimate fish or cut bait document. What I found is that I had to learn where the revenue came from, who are the people I could trust inside the company to make decisions if I wasn't available. And what I've done with families, and if you ever want to see people start sweating, I'll sit in a room with an operator, an owner, and I'll say, give me your cell phone, or in this case, it was a BlackBerry. And I said, okay, so we're going to do the dry test now. He goes, what are you talking about? And I said, that's it. You're not allowed to communicate with anybody else in your company for the next 72 hours. I'll let them know you're fine. You can go home to your wife and your children. But if you talk outside the game, it ruins the test. And that's where you know the rubber hits the road. So does it protect your family? Yes, because your family needs time. It needs time to do what families do and process. It offers that cloak between family and business that's important. Does it protect your assets? Yes, it does. Because if you mess up the business, then you also know the investments are at risk, real estate investments as well, and any specialty asset classes. It also can be a map for philanthropy initiatives. And you can, in fact, do a contingency plan for all of these asset classes. Does it protect your business? Well, by definition, yes. It keeps it operational and functioning at times of stress. More importantly, it protects your business family legacy, which is a lot more, as we all appreciate intuitively, than just the business. It's our purpose, it's our values, it's our identity, it's the structure, and definitionally, it helps define who our families are. And it also creates a path to sustainability beyond life events as they unravel for us. So, into the optimism and the light. As a result of this journey, I realized that I had never told the market that I'm part of a business family, if you can imagine, through 25 years professionally of my experience. And I thought, gosh, I'm missing the story. I'm just not that good at my job. So I created Dynamic Legacy to test the market, to see if there was a need in business families and single and multifamily offices to offer them just the strategic decision-making advice that's unrelated to asset management or legal or accounting or tax. I can collaborate with all the best of class professionals, many of who are in this room, and bring them in for the expertise. But sometimes what business families want is the independent and objective advice of somebody who's not tied to a revenue position to help them figure out, is this a business that transitions? Is it a buy or sell? What can I do to prepare my next generation? How do I put more money in my pocket with my financial relationships, whether it be advisor, banks, or commercial loans? So that's where I can come in and offer what I think may be the only independent and objective strategic advice as part of Dynamic Legacy. And more than anything else, from our family to yours, we share best practices. And when I've engaged with families, as I have been doing now, I can share their best practices. So this is kind of a shortcut to peer advice, because that is my role and my purpose, to share the best practices to alleviate the challenges we all face individually. One of the things that I'm most proud to share with you today is that Ivy Business School and the Dynamic Legacy have partnered, and we've created the Stewardship Institute. And the first curriculum that we'll be offering in 2017 is called Preparing the Next Generation. So what's that? I'm here to address the fact that nobody stood after the third to fourth generation transition exercise that we did earlier. And what we're doing as partners is setting a foundational course for next generations to give them a level of competency and confidence around the exact issues where business transitions falter: communication, trust, role, accountability, business and financial literacy, because not all of our next generation are going to go to business school or get MBAs. They're going to have other interests and dreams, but they may be very valuable contributors to, as ownership or as passive shareholders, or in other ways to the family business spectrum. So we need to harness those talents, and we need to make better use of them. Beyond that, I want to tell you a cute story. I alluded to a multi-generational serial entrepreneurs. So in the 1800s, my probably great-great-grandfather and my second cousin's great-great-great-grandfather ran a textile shop in southern Ontario called Fulford & Brothers. And recently, about 2 years ago at a family event, I ran into my second cousins, and they've started a hobby farm making honey. And so when I found the jar, I thought, this is the best marketing tool I've ever found for Dynamic Legacy. It's the actual retro font and historical label of Fulford Brothers Textile Shop. And for fun, they make honey. And so I understand that Chris White is in the room from Fruitland, if he's still here. Oh, has he left? Well, he's apparently a honey fan, and I wanted to gift him the honey to say thank you for his attendance, because I actually don't know what I'm going to do with a whole kilogram of honey. But I just wanted to bring it to emphasize that when you think of the three-circle model, and if you look at Dynamic Legacies, it's over here, it's too small, but if you look at their emblem, it's the three-circle model. But what I've done is I put a green shoot of growth in the middle, in the overlaps. Because these are the areas of our greatest challenge, but they're also the areas of our opportunity for future generations. And what we aim to do is harness those opportunities and the talent that comes in our next generations and bring it to the forefront as innovations within your family businesses to keep them sustainable. Obviously, from my perspective, I have a personal bias not to sell the company. My nephews are now in their 20s. They've got external work experience. They're educated. One of the biggest choices we faced was whether we had a legacy sale or go for best bottom dollar. We chose legacy. That was my brother. I was like, take the money. He goes, we don't need that much money. Let's keep our employees at the table for the rest of their working years. Let's make sure that this brand and the legacy continues. And 5 years later, I can tell you it does, and it has. And I'm very proud to share with you that my nephew is now being trained as the general manager for the company. So it's much more than about money. And I thank you humbly for your time as being the last speaker, and I hope I kept you engaged.